What's up, guys? I'm Fernando Juncadella here with Blake Alderman. We're here as Florida's 7-on-7 high school tournament is just wrapping up. Inside the Gators has been here the past several days covering the Florida camps. And Blake, what were the big things that happened the past several days?
You know, Thursday kicked off with the first ever elite QB camp, which they had many coaches from the 7-on-7. You know, it was a big thing. They had a lot of 2018. They had their 2017 quarterback commit and Jake Allen out there. You know, a lot of talented arms on Thursday to go with the sensational sophomore night camp they had, which is a lot of up-and-coming underclassmen. Continued the weekend with Friday Night Lights, which everyone knows is a big camp that the Gators put on. And you could really feel the buzz back with this staff. Jim McElwain and the guys have really made it a point to bring back the hoopla, the fun part. You know, that this was one of the biggest camps in college football, and this staff really made it a point to bring that back. And then you were here today with the 7-on-7 camp and the lineman camp, and you can just really feel that this staff is, they're aggressively recruiting these guys, and they're trying to build something here in Florida.
Let's take a look at the tape. So, Blake, there's some big news coming out of this weekend. The Gators landed a big-time commitment. What can you tell us more about it?
You know, the Gators have really looked to bolster their linebacker core. You know, they have Alex Anzalone, they have Daniel McMillan, they have Jared Davis. You know, these are guys that quite possibly could be gone after the season. So, that's a position of need that the staff has wanted to fill. They already have a commitment in Ventrell Miller. And they added James Houston to the mix. You know, he's coming off of an ACL tear that he recently tore this summer. But everything seems fine. You know, the staff is going to keep tabs on how things heal. He's obviously, ACL tears really, they're not as tragic as they used to be. So, I think that's something he's going to bounce back from. You know, he has the team doctors keep an eye on him. He's a guy that mainly plays outside linebacker, but the staff thinks that he's a hybrid guy that can fit along the board there. So, they're really excited about that guy. It's a guy that you can plug and play, and he should, hopefully make an impact for them down the road sometime.
Something that wasn't as publicized as Friday Night Lights was the next level QB camp. Obviously, Jake Allen was on hand, but he wasn't the only big name that was on deck.
Yeah, definitely. It seemed like the guy that really stole the show, there was a lot of great quarterbacks there. This is a position that the staff has tried to address. They got Kyle Trask last year. They have Jake Allen obviously now, and then Felipe Franks also is another guy they signed last year. But Florida hasn't had the quarterback play of, Danny Warfel, Tim Tebow. These are guys that were staples of the quarterback position. Florida has won Heisman trophies with these guys. Even Steve Spurrier to boot on there. These are guys that they've had. So they're bringing this camp. It's the first year they've done it, the next level QB camp. They have guys that were coaching the camp. It was practically like a smaller version of the Elite 11, which is, arguably one of the biggest quarterback camps in the country. So, they brought those guys in there. The guy that really impressed me was Artur Satowski. He's a guy from New Jersey. He's somewhere around 6'2", 6'3", 205 pounds. That's the frame that this staff likes. He fits into a pro-style offense. Light, he has some zip on the ball. He can stand in the pocket. He's typically what the staff is looking for. He earned himself an offer at this camp, and he was really an impressive guy that, he really caught my eye and it really impressed me. I know he impressed the staff too because he left with an offer, so.
Staying on the offensive side of the ball, Adarius Lemons, a UNC commit, didn't really look like a UNC commit. He was decked out in orange and blue gear. From what I saw, he impressed Coach Skipper at the running back position. What can you tell us more about him?
First and foremost, to address him, Friday Night Lights has always been a big camp. The big-name guys, they come, they hang out on the sidelines, they watch. Obviously, it's great to get these targets and these prospects on campus. I love seeing him come out and compete. He was drenched in sweat after the camp. He put in work. He really went 110% for this camp, and it was nice to see a high-profile recruit like that come in and put in the work. You already said he came in decked out in the Gator gear. He went and hit the Gator store before and bought himself some new clothes there, Gator hat, Gator pants. He was decked out, and he left saying that Florida was pushing for the number one spot. They have made it a point to run the ball under McElwain. They've signed 4 4-star running backs over the last 2 cycles. It's been a question mark. Who is Florida going to sign at running back in this cycle? And after this camp, it really looks like Adarius Lemons is a guy that the Florida staff can add.
And you mentioned competition. That was probably the theme of the entire camp, and that's probably something McElwain wants to bring every single year.
Absolutely. You could see them. They have this new indoor practice facility. They did their warm-ups and, position drills and whatnot in there. When it came time for one-on-ones, they're going to the swamp and they're competing under the lights. McElwain is one of those guys that he installs this competition, this family thing in this school. They bringing this back to, iron sharpens iron, I guess, if you can say that. He wants the best of the best. And speaking of guys that stole the show, you have to mention the play that Rivals 100 wide receiver Jerry Jeudy made. He made an amazing grab on the sidelines where he just completely juked a guy and was gone. It was one of those things where he makes the grab. Players, coaches, pretty much everyone in the entire building went nuts after that catch. So, that was really the highlight of the night there. And that just goes back to competition. High-profile guys like that making big plays in the swamp.
Well, guys, we hope you enjoy the video. Be sure to subscribe to InsideTheGators.com for the most up-to-date Gator news from recruiting and on the field. For Blake Alderman, I'm Fernando Juncadella. Have a good one, guys.